Hey Computer, play About Bees podcast.
Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to About Bees, Culture, and Curiosity with Ron Miksha and
Bidzina Mosiashvili.
Yeah, and Bidzina. What are we doing today?
Is crystallized honey fake? We're going to figure that out.
Oh, I didn't even know we were doing that. Crystallized honey fake. I guess we could talk about that. That wasn't really what I had in mind for today. What I thought we were going to do is talk about granulation and how a beekeeper could avoid having chunky honey in the hive before you try to extract it. So, but we can certainly talk about whether chunky honey is fake.
Yeah, because that's a question that gets brought up often. Even my own dad questions my honey. He thinks I have fake honey because it crystallizes so fast.
Does he see you mixing up tons of sugar syrup and hauling it out? Is that why he's thinking that?
He saw me do that feed. I fed them. He saw a video of me doing that.
Uh-huh.
But it was not for honey. That was for their feed.
That was to keep them alive.
That was to keep them alive.
Yeah. So, where did he see that video? Now, I understand. I have never looked at it, but I think you have a beekeeping YouTube channel.
That's right. It's called Busy Bees Televised.
Busy Bees Televised.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's BZEE or Z in America. BZEE.
Bee?
And then bees. It's very confusing, actually. Maybe I need to adjust that. But
You'll lose all your audience
yeah.
if you change your name now.
No, I can't. Yeah, that's right. So it's Busy Bees Televised.
Okay. Well, I'm going to look for that. And it's only on YouTube. You didn't make it into a podcast channel, did you?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll all look for that. Busy Bees. Busy.
It was actually originally supposed to be just bees.
Oh, but somebody else already had that.
No, somebody didn't have that. I didn't want it to make it BS bees.
BS.
Yeah.
Bees. No, maybe that's what it should be called.
Maybe.
I think so. And we have a special guest here with us, folks, today. If you're watching on the video cast, you will see a small dog kind of leaning into me. Yeah, no, he's looking at me. I'm talking about you, small dog. So we do have a small dog here. The camera is behind you there. Misty, do you want to see the camera? It's over there. There. Now. No, he doesn't.
No.
He's shy. A little bit shy. So if we hear some howling or barking or something, then it's just Misty the dog. But we are going to talk about granulated honey today, and I think we will explore the idea of why people think that honey that's crystallized has a problem. I think that'll become a little more obvious as we go along. But first of all, I think it might be worthwhile to just kind of talk about what granulated honey is and why it can be a problem for people with their bees. So honey will normally turn into a harder form, and it's kind of like the super saturated solution that you might have on the stove. Inside the beehive, the temperature is fairly warm, like in the 80s and in the 30s in Celsius. And because of that, the honey stays liquid and for quite a long time if there are enough bees to cover the part of the hive that has honey stored in it. Now, if for some reason the population goes down and the bees have to cluster tightly and the honey is left where it's cool, then the honey will start to switch over from that supersaturated solution. It will unsupersaturate itself, and it will start to form crystals. Kind of like if you put that hot sugar water on the stove and you heat it up and you keep adding sugar, add a little more sugar. As long as it stays hot, you can dissolve a lot of sugar into the water. But as soon as it starts to cool off, I think most people have done this or had to do this at one time or another. As the sugar water cools off, you shut off the stove and you let it cool off. If you put a spoon or something in there, then crystals will form around that. Very similar to what happens with honey. Slightly different chemically, but very similar. So honey's natural state is to turn into some sort of a solid. But Bidzina is telling us that there are people who don't believe that.
Y- Well, people don't believe that, and they believe it's mixed with sugar. The more your honey is hard or dry or whatever the term is, it's more crystallized, the more sugar it has. And I guess they're not wrong. It's higher.
That's yeah, to some extent they are correct.
Yeah.
So
But just not the traditional sugar people.
right, not
Yeah.
sucrose sugar, not table sugar. There is table sugar naturally occurring in honey, but it's usually around the level of 2 or 3%, and that's all. Instead, the main sugars in honey are glucose and fructose. Glucose and fructose both occur at roughly 30%, somewhere in that range. You can have as low as 25% glucose in some types of honey. Depends on the flower, not on anything else. It's the flower's source, not the bees, that determine how much fructose and how much glucose. It's the nectar that's been gathered from the flowers, and when it comes into the hive, it can be more glucose or more fructose. So, because of that, the honey will differentially, well, first of all, it will taste different. It'll look a little different because of the different amounts of those sugars in it, but the honey will be different in how quickly it will crystallize.
Yeah, and so I consulted with the robot about if it can give him a detailed scientific breakdown of crystallization, and this is kind of what it gave. Should I kind of talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned supersaturation, right?
I did.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't wrong.
No, I think you're correct. Yeah, so that's supersaturation. It's honey has high sugar content, often exceeding 70%. It creates a super.
Oh, it has to be way over 70%. It should be often exceeding like 80%, because if it
Wow.
exceeds 70%, then it's 30% water. And you cannot sell honey that has more than 18.6% water in it.
Huh, you're so right. That's actually, look at this. It just made a. Now it.
It corrected itself?
No, it didn't. But that's a very obvious mistake
Okay.
that it messed up there. This means that there's more sugar dissolved in water than it can comfortably hold at a given temperature.
Mm-hmm.
This instability sets the stage for crystallization. And then you mentioned also glucose versus fructose.
Yep.
So the ratio of glucose to fructose plays a pivotal role. Glucose, with its lower solubility, is more eager to crystallize compared to the more soluble fructose. Thus, honeys with higher glucose to fructose ratio tend to crystallize faster. And then we also have the nucleation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the
Well, the nuclei would be the little dust particle, wax particle, some sort of a little speck that's inside the honey, and that forms the spot, the nucleus of where a crystal can develop.
Huh. Yeah, so crystallization initiates with the formation of tiny nuclei or seed crystals. These can arise spontaneously due to fluctuations in the solutions, or be introduced from external sources like pollen grains or dust particles. Crystal growth. Once nuclei form, glucose molecules start attaching them to them,
Mm-hmm.
leading to crystallization growth. The rate of growth is influenced by temperatures, the concentration of glucose, and the presence of other substances in the honey. Temperatures role. Okay, yeah, we know about the temperature one.
Mm-hmm. We're going to get into
Yeah.
the temperature a lot
But-
more here as we go on,
Huh.
but that's a really good summary. So what you've told us is that it's the glucose that is the more soluble and the more likely than, no, the less soluble and the more likely than to form crystals. And the fructose is soluble, which means that it disappears in the water that's naturally occurring in honey. So honey can naturally have between about 15% and up to about 19%. I say 18.6 because that's a legal limit. You can actually sell honey at 19%, and some honey in the stores is 19% water, moisture, natural. They don't put it in, but where it has that high of an amount of water, 19% versus 18.6, then it has to be pasteurized. So they have to heat it to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit for a few seconds so that the yeast that naturally occurs in honey is killed. If you don't heat it like that and you have honey that has higher moisture, it'll start to ferment.
So how would they heat like a large batch for a couple seconds, like to shock it?
Yeah, they usually do that in the pumping system. So you'll have
Oh,
a big tank full of the honey, kept maybe warm enough to keep it flowing and not crystallized, and then push it through a flash point, like a sleeve around the pipe. This
Yeah.
would be one way to do it. And inside of that sleeve are heating elements to get that temperature way up there, just for the amount of time that the honey takes to flow through it. So if the honey is flowing, honey can flow kind of slowly because it's so viscous, and then if it's flowing where it takes a few seconds to cover a certain distance, then during those few seconds it gets exposed to that really high heat.
I see. So it's they're pretty much somehow managed to almost like do it like gram by gram.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of by gram, little bit by little bit as it's going through. So they don't try to heat up a whole tank to
Right.
160 degrees, because then you have the issue of cooling it off fast enough
Yeah.
so that you don't burn it. Because the longer the temperature stays high enough to pasteurize the honey for sure, it's going to make it darker and taste a little bit caramelized.
Right.
So that's the problem.
Hmm.
Now, one of the issues we really want to spend some time on today for people who are keeping bees, they're going to find this maybe useful information, is how do you keep the combs from crystallizing in the hive before you have a chance to process it? This won't be as much of an issue to people living in warmer climate areas, but they probably would like to know about this anyway, because it deals with handling honey properly. So if the honey becomes crystallized in the comb, you almost have lost your crop. And I'm reminded of a story that I heard 40 years ago when I moved into Saskatchewan. And one of the beekeepers told me that for years and years, people could produce honey and not have it granulate because there wasn't the type of flower in any kind of amount that would make the honey crystallize quickly. So back in the day, and I'm talking like in the 60s at the latest, and before that, beekeeping in northern Saskatchewan and northern Alberta was conducted sort of like this. People would maybe have another full-time job as a school teacher, as a storekeeper, as a farmer, and in the spring they would order some packages of bees, which would arrive by rail from California or Texas or somewhere, and they would have these small cages that would have 7,000 bees. That's about 2 pounds of bees and a queen, and they would release them into a box and let the bees build up. And the storekeeper would pretty much forget about the bees. So they would put the bees from the cage into the hive and wait about a month and put a second box on so that the queen has lots of room to lay her eggs. And then they would forget about it for another few weeks, and then they would go out and they would put like 5 or 6 honey boxes on top. And then they'd forget about it until October and just let it sit there. And in October, the colony would be much weaker, smaller, and they would remove the honey boxes. And unfortunately, this was just part of the process, they would kill the old bees because they didn't want the bees to have to go through the winter. The winters were so long. And at that time, people weren't that good at wintering the bees.
This is Manitoba?
Saskatchewan and Alberta, but Manitoba also, yes, also in Manitoba.
So they would leave their supers on all the way until October.
Yes, and not extract. I'm talking less about the commercial operators in those days, but just people who had a dozen hives of bees as a sideline. So this is their system. And 1 year, now this is a story I heard when I was young. 1 year, they did this same system that Grandpa had done, and just the way you keep bees in this area. And 1 year, they wait until the end of October and bring in the boxes, and they're all solid crystallized honey. It was because
They've never experienced that before.
they had never experienced it before, because before the honey sources were clovers, alfalfa, sweet clover, and not canola. Canola is sort of a designer food. It came out of the turnip family, mustard family. It's all related. And due to experimental genetics, not actual GMO work, but just, breeding, basically, they bred a better quality of a plant, and they called it Canadian oil. That's canola. It actually designates Canadian oil low acid. So it's the low acid that they had to try to create, because without that, before that it was called rape or rapeseed, and unless it was reduced in acidity, it was not a very good product for people to use for cooking or for making salad dressings or anything like that.
I heard it was used for like industrial.
It was.
Yeah.
So during World War II, a lot of farmers grew rapeseed, and it was harvested and then crushed. The seeds are little tiny, just like it says in the Bible, you have faith the size of a mustard seed. Well, the mustard seeds are pretty small. They're these little tiny, round, hard kernels, and that's not much faith, is it? But if you have a lot of those faithful little mustard seeds, you can grind them up and make oil that during World War II, the farmers and the government got together and they used that oil that came out of the rapeseed. They used it for keeping machinery on the farms going.
Right. So industrial lubricant.
Industrial lubricant.
So that's what's going in our throats. We're just lubing it up with.
We're lubing it up. But, the industrial machinery probably didn't care that it didn't taste that great or that it could make
Right.
you sick. So
They might have liked it.
machinery must have liked it because it kept going. Yeah, made it through the war.
Right. Some of those old things are still around to this day, and
That's correct. Yeah.
it's probably
yeah.
all that canola that we were feeding them.
Oh, might be. So the canola then was new. It was designed by scientists and agriculture specialists as a type of a plant that could grow in a very short season, which we have plenty of up here in the northern hemisphere, in the far north of the northern hemisphere. So it was very well adapted to Saskatchewan and Alberta and Manitoba. And we now have about 20 million acres of canola. And there were 0 acres of canola as recently as, say, 1975 or so. So until then, the beekeepers didn't have to worry about granulation. But once they started having canola in the neighborhood, the honey would quickly crystallize even inside the combs. So today's episode is mostly to talk about how to keep your bees from having crystallized or granulated honey.
It is a beautiful sight to see when you drive out and see canola blooming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And it, with 20 million acres up here in Western Canada, it's hard to avoid seeing it when you're driving around in the summer.
That's right. No,
And-
exactly. It's very.
And it does produce, these days, I would say that probably 90% of the honey that's produced in Alberta, and I can't remember what our numbers are, 40, 50, 60 million pounds of honey a year coming out of Alberta,
Yeah.
in that range. So 80 or 90% of all that honey is canola honey. And it will crystallize very quickly in the drum, in the bottle, in the container. So you do have to,
I'm going to go grab that Coke.
yeah, go get a Coca-Cola for yourself. Now, folks, it's Coca-Cola that he's grabbing, just to be sure we know. While he's gone, I'll just continue a little bit more about canola itself. So the farmers started to plant it because it does yield a lot. It's a easy plant to grow. It depletes the soil a little bit, so they often have to rotate to keep other crops once in a while to rebuild up the soil. But the canola is definitely a good farm cash crop. And because of that, and because of the fact that it produces so much nectar, the beekeepers were able to find an almost unlimited amount of nectar source for the bees. Unfortunately, it is a honey that crystallizes really quickly. And because of that, the beekeepers had to learn not to leave the boxes on the hives until sometime into October or November. They had to be able to take those boxes off and take care of the honey earlier. So I thought we would talk about some of the main factors, some of the main reasons why granulation occurs. And briefly, hey, are you singing? What's he see?
Oh, you see something.
Oh, he sees a dog out there. Okay. Misty, I'm probably going to have to cut that out of the podcast.
No, that's pretty funny.
No, I don't want to.
People want.
Hey,
That's pretty cute.
it's okay. It's okay. He's very sensitive and defensive of his family home here, and no dog is allowed to walk within. We even have it posted: no dogs within 100 meters of our house. But people just don't pay attention. They just think because
Did you put
it's
his face on it?
oh
On the poster, be like, he's patrolling.
yeah, he's patrolling. That would scare everybody if his face was on there.
I think it would be a good idea.
Okay, we'll consider
They
that.
might die by the cuteness.
Poor animal. Okay. Yeah, if he weren't so cute.
Well, the animal, not yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Where were we before the dog got excited about visitors? We were talking about granulation.
Granulation and some of the factors
Mm-hmm.
that take place.
So here are 4 really important things to pay attention to when you're producing honey and when you're harvesting it too. One of them that you're not going to have much control over is the floral source. So if the floral source is a type of flower that naturally produces a lot of glucose and less fructose, you're going to have honey that's going to crystallize very quickly. So floral source is one. Purity, you remember Bidzina talking about the nucleus,
Right.
that's a type of purity that we have to think about with our honey. So if you're carrying out a truckload of boxes, keep them covered. Don't drive like we used to in the old days down a dusty road with all these boxes exposed to the air and dust settling in the boxes. And then when you get honey in them, all that dust, not only is it dirty dust, but it also forms nuclei that the crystals from the glucose can form around, and that will speed up the crystallization also. And at the end of the season, a lot of beekeepers will take their extracted boxes and carry them out into the field, back onto the beehives, and let the bees clean up all the little bits of honey that are in there.
Yeah.
Because if they don't do that, the honey that's in the boxes could end up crystallizing, and then that will enhance or speed up the crystallization again. So it's not really a purity
next
issue.
year's-
For
next
next
year.
year, right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, for next year. Temperature, another thing to keep your eye on. Honey will crystallize the most easily at a temperature of around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, which is just in the low 50s, somewhere around that kind of temperature. Then if you have those temperatures, especially, at night, it gets down into the 40s, maybe in the 50s, and the bees leave because they're clustering up tight in the fall, then there's a really good chance that that lower temperature will speed up the rate of crystallization. As
Right.
long as it's warm, you don't really have as much of an issue, and you can leave the boxes out a little bit longer.
So, what is the perfect, most comfortable temperature for the bees inside the hive?
I'm going to get it wrong, but maybe your machine can tell
generally.
you. It's somewhere around 32 or so Celsius, which is about 86 to 88 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in that range. So, what's the temperature of a brood nest?
I don't know.
Does it know?
Oh wait, it's thinking.
Okay, it's thinking.
But
We'll come back to it in a moment, folks.
yes. So why I asked? So it's saying. Okay. Still thinking.
Okay.
But why I asked that is, you know, if we can keep your honey, if you keep your honey in the optimal hive temperature, then it shouldn't ever crystallize in theory. Because how do the bees eat it? Because they always have to keep it liquid. So, I mean, they're gonna eat it eventually,
Right.
but like,
Right.
but they probably have like like a year that they're gonna hold on. Well, they're probably waiting for spring. So whatever.
Right, right. I really don't know the answer to that question, if it will last indefinitely, if it's kept at around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I think it probably will, but there
But
are
it should
other
take a lot
factors.
longer, like
It
6
certainly
months.
would take a lot longer at that higher temperature. But two things do happen with a higher temperature, well above room temperature, then the honey is more likely to turn darker. And most people don't want that darker
Right.
looking honey. So that's one downside. The other one is the cost of keeping the honey, like your boxes at that high temperature.
Right. Um, and then another interesting thing is if you put your honey inside of a freezer below freezing, it will not crystallize either, or take a lot longer.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
It's like a
So
weird
that again is on temperature.
phenomenon.
That's a weird thing in
Yeah.
that you can actually freeze liquid honey into a block that's as solid as a piece of ice, and then thaw it out, and in a day or two it'll still be liquid,
Yeah.
after thawing it. So it goes into a frozen state.
Right.
The last, so what we've talked about so far, and we're going to go into detail on each of these, is that the things that contribute to granulation in your boxes in the field are the floral source, which is really hard to avoid, but there are certain types of flowers that produce more glucose than other types of flowers. Those do include canola, but they also include things like mesquite and cotton. Cotton honey could granulate very quickly because the glucose is pretty high in that plant also. Doesn't depend on the location or the type of bee, not so much on the temperature as, in generating the amount of glucose versus fructose versus the amount of water in the hive, but those things are generally controlled by the plant type, the species of plant. So how do you avoid 20 million acres of canola in Western Canada? You just don't. So instead you learn to live with it. And it does make a nice white honey.
Yeah.
Not quite as nice or white as sweet clover, which we talked about not long ago. Sweet clover honey is water white, beautiful honey. I love sweet clover, but
And won't crystallize as fast, sweet clover, or is that the same?
it will crystallize, but not as quickly as canola.
So canola is the real culprit here.
It is the culprit, yes.
Okay.
So back in the days, in the 1960s, for example, when beekeepers were keeping their packages and throwing on the supers and not extracting until fall, most of the honey was from sweet clover and alfalfa, so it wasn't crystallized yet. If they waited till the next spring, it probably would have been crystallized.
Is there a way to eradicate canola? No.
No, no, we don't eradicate canola at this point. Maybe someday. Things have
I
changed.
stopped eating actually, but yeah, sorry, things have changed. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, that's okay. I'm just thinking that our environment has changed so much here that we have all these new plants, and I'm just wondering if someday in the future it won't be necessary to grow 20 million acres of canola. And I'm thinking not my future, but maybe 100 years from now. What do you think? Like,
Stop growing canola?
yeah, stop growing a lot of things, like no more livestock. Possible.
I think we have enough land and enough resources to go back to a more, like, we don't need industrial farming. I mean, we have to get the meat from somewhere, but
No, we don't have to. We don't have to eat meat.
well, if they figure out some magic pill, I'm all for it. But but I, because every pill that they've come out with so far, it seems to be not. It's only a supplement at this point. It can't replace anything. But I would mind a. Oh man, we have a plane flying over. But I wouldn't mind taking a meal pill.
A meal peel? Yeah.
Meal peel, yeah.
I think there are a lot of people like that because food is just, so maybe there will be a point in the future where we won't be farming unless it's like a real specialty, kind of a niche thing. Like, look, they grew tomatoes. And somebody will say, yeah, but, we can make them in the factory so easily. And then somebody else will say, yeah, but they grew them out of the dirt. And, and I think maybe we will reach a point where most of our food will be basically like pills. It'll be, little blops of stuff that have been designed to keep us healthy and, and sufficiently fed. And then when you do have a meal, it'll be purely for social reasons. Just, sit around the table, chat with the kids, or go out with some friends and eat some food.
So Russell Crowe, the famous movie actor,
Mm-hmm.
Gladiator and whatnot, he's a rancher now. So
Oh.
he has a cattle ranch where he
Here
has,
in Alberta?
I hope so. No, it's Australia. I
Oh.
think he's Australian.
Oh. Yeah, I think he is. You're right.
Yeah. So it's somewhere in Australia.
You know
and
what they don't call people from Australia Australians.
they call them Aussies.
Yeah. Nobody will know what you're talking about when you say he's an Australian.
Oh, I thought they called them kangarooians or something.
No.
No?
That sounds disparaging.
No,
It'd be like, of course, Alberta doesn't have any rats, but, if you think of a place that has rats, and then you call the people from there rat-like, like that,
no.
this is,
Like, not this is like the kangaroo land. So
yeah, but in Australia, the kangaroos are not much better than rats.
I guess so because they just hop
They
around.
bounce around and eat everything. Yeah.
I mean, you got. I've never seen a boxing rat, but I've seen a boxing kangaroo, so they're kind of different.
You've seen a kangaroo that would box?
Yeah,
That mixed martial arts for sure.
they stand up
Mixed
on their
species. That's a new form of martial
tail. They
arts.
stand up on their tail and kick with their legs, and then when you get close, they punch you with their hands.
Oh.
They got a full on, just like him. Look at him. He might have just. You heard us talk about the kangaroo. He's already mad.
Yeah, he's mad. Our dog. The dog is getting excited.
Yeah, so he has a cattle ranch, and he became a rancher. And honestly, I think he has like 200 heads of cattle, right? And the person
Does he have the whole body or just the 200 heads?
just no, he might have the legs as well and the head, but I don't know about the body. But the person that was interviewing him as like, oh, what are you doing with the meat? Are you selling it? Like, this is like for money. Like, this is a lot of work because he's doing it himself. He's like, no. He's like, this is all purely for myself to eat. He's like, I want.
He's going to eat 200 heads of cows. Well, if he
he's
just
a
eats
big
the
guy.
heads.
He's a big guy. He
Yeah.
might be able to do it. But
I've heard of head cheese. I don't know. Maybe that's similar.
it could be, that movie Animal?
Mm-hmm.
When what's his name, Rob Schneider, becomes an animal, wild animal.
Yeah.
You've seen the movie, right? I'm talking.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm trying to remember. Some movies I try to forget right away.
Rob Schneider. This is everyone's favorite. But he could be like that, just eating a whole cow. In the movie, he eats a whole cow.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe that's what Russell Crowe's doing.
I guess
but now
I
this is just a
remember that.
tangent on. Anyways, Russell Crowe became a cattle rancher for just his own consumption, and he sometimes doesn't sell the meat, but he will give it to his neighbors. And he believes this is the way the future. We can't have industrial farming anymore,
Mhm.
and he does it all free range.
Yeah, but he's like a millionaire about 30 times over, so he can afford to do this. Not all of us can afford to grow our own 200 heads.
No, we can't, but we have the means as a whole to start investing in different forms of farming
Totally.
that
Totally.
are
Yeah.
exist. Like it's not nothing new, right? We're
I
not going to be
agree. I
reinventing
agree.
the wheel. It
Mhm.
just would just be taking existing methods.
Mhm.
I know that the someone actually commented on our TikTok that the natives did something, the Three Sisters method or something like that.
Yes.
Do
Yeah.
you know about?
Planting squash and corn and what was the other sister? Beans. Planting
Yeah,
them all together because they each help each other grow.
yeah. So do you
Hmm.
can you talk about that? Because someone brought it up, and I'm like, Three Sisters. I've never.
Yeah, that's all I really know. This would have
Okay.
been in the eastern part of North America, and the native people would have
But
grown corn because it was native to North America, and the corn would be like the tall spike, and the beans, also native to North America, could grow up that, and at the same time, beans are a legume and they enrich the soil. So you have that going on. And then you have squash, which also are kind of viney but would stretch out more, between the various corn plants. So instead of having, 6 rows of corn and then a little ways away, 6 rows of beans and then have 6 rows of squash, they put it all mixed together.
yeah, and so what's really messed up about like monoculture farming, I think, is that they'll take a dedicated space of land, farm only one crop, but not for that area. They're not going to feed the locals or something. It's not to feed the local area. This is all being exported to billions of people around the world. So can you just imagine this one area is being depleted, like
Yeah,
because it's being made for so many different people.
right.
So that's kind of one thing that we should move away from is like, why is my food coming from, like, why is corn coming from this Florida or whatever when I can get corn locally?
Right. No, that's a really good point. There are limits to that if we want to have tomatoes in the wintertime or if we want to have oranges in Canada
Yeah,
and if they want to have apples in Florida because the apple tree doesn't grow very well in really warm climates, then you do need to have some trade and some, you know, and then because of, let's face it, the bottom line is always money.
yeah,
So if the farm is going to have a few apples and a few this and a few that, then you need special equipment or you need different marketing for 6 different products, and that often just doesn't work as efficiently, and you run out of money. It just
yeah,
doesn't. It's not sustainable these days. And then there's
yeah,
the problem too that I have to acknowledge that with 8 billion people all hungry 3 times a day in the world, right now the system we're using is the only way that we can feed that many people. It just isn't possible with the smaller, really small farms. It just isn't. Like, I'd like to believe it could be, and I know
no,
people who are listening are going to argue and they're going to say, "Oh yeah, you could do it."
no, no. I think we need, instead of like a 10% farm population, we need at least 20, 30, like, but then people are gonna, okay, how are we gonna specialize and have all these great scientific technological advancements? I don't know. You're right, it is complicated, but this way of farming,
Right.
I don't think it's good for anyone. It's not good for the animal, it's not good for our health, it's not good for
Right.
the land. uh,
Yeah.
because there's no, like, what's the point, like, of saving so much money if we're not going to be here anymore?
Yeah. That's another. That's a whole different issue, a different problem, and that's our lack of ability to see long term. We just want to buy a big new truck next year,
Yeah,
and
I don't know.
we want to go on that
uh,
Caribbean cruise, and we're not really thinking about the grandchildren. Although we say we are, but we're not really thinking about the.
Wouldn't it be cooler though to see something like great built, or like some like amazing, like agricultural, like just for example, there's this ancient area in Cambodia, and they were able to create this water system that they still don't understand how they were able to do it. The amount of land that they had to excavate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we're gonna be like just there's construction that needs to be done. Just like why don't we just
Yeah.
like the guys or whoever wants these cool trucks or big truck like there or businesses or like capitalists that
Mhm.
want to make money. Like this is what people want. Like people want to
Mhm.
see great things, big ideas happen. And if you spend your money, I think people will come and build. Like if you build it, they will come. Is usually sometimes not doesn't work out, but in this case, I think it will. Like let's say a developer builds a community. In, yeah, what the heck is going on? Like imagine a developer makes a new community, middle of nowhere, right?
Okay.
They just buy vacant. They
Focus, Ron. Focus. I hear animals in the background,
Yeah.
and I don't know if our little dog is going to get eaten. I thought at first it was somebody in my house that
Thought
was
it was
sneezing or
sneezing,
something,
like-
but I don't think so.
Someone just sniffed some pepper, or
Yeah. So what you're saying then is we could have isolated communities that would be self-sufficient, self-sustaining, and produce most of the food that that community would need.
yeah, like what? Well, like if maybe I guess the idea is not feasible, but I feel like we're at this point where it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Like if a developer just goes to some cheap, like just creates a new city essentially from scratch,
Yeah.
and yeah, puts in millions, maybe billions of dollars into it, starts selling the homes just like they would
Right.
anywhere else. But this community has everything that it needs. They have a greenhouse, they have their own electricity, they have their own hydro water, like everything that a community needs to suffice 1,000 people, it
Mhm.
has. And all the houses come with their own like self-sustaining generators and whatnot. Like it's like a fully integrated one unit, and it's sold as a package, and it's not just.
So you'd own a share in
Well,
this.
no, you would be
in
your
this-
own house. It would be you would
Yeah,
buy.
but
the
I mean
whole-
everything else, like the electricity generation, the water supply, the sewage, all of that would be jointly owned.
well, it would be it would be like some sort of taxes that would or something that would have to
Mm-hmm.
keep the municipal.
Yeah. No, I'm just kind of thinking a little bit of my friends who are living on Hutterite farms, and they have about 100 people, and they have about 10,000 acres of land, and they grow basically everything they need is
Right.
produced there, including building furniture, doing mechanical repairs. You know, they have really well established shops for welding and for carpentry.
So
and
yeah, they're very
very self-sufficient, and in that case, it is run as a corporation where everybody owns a share of the whole thing. So, yeah. Anyway, why don't we talk a little bit more about the fact that we have 20 million acres of monocultured canola growing in Western Canada, and that that plant creates a lot of crystallized honey.
I just wanted to add that they say that if we were to take every single person in the world, about 8 billion people,
Mm-hmm.
and give them each about 1,000 square feet of land
Mhm.
with a house or whatever, you would be able to fit everyone side by side in the state of Texas, all 8 billion.
Oh, wow.
So there's so much land that's not
Mhm.
being used in the world. And everybody's in these concentrated areas that just being overrun. Like, for example, Bangladesh has 140 million people,
Yeah.
the same population as Russia.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what do you think about this then? There has been recently in ecology some scientists who are presenting the idea that instead of us all having small farms, little pieces of land, that maybe it's much better for the environment if we all lived in one tightly packed space and the rest of the world was all wilderness. That it would be
Yeah.
a healthier planet that way.
I don't see how that would be correct because there would be so much toxic. Because it doesn't matter what creature, living thing it is, it always creates toxins, byproducts by living in a concentrated area. It could be a plant, it could be like a fish, it could be could be a reptile. Anything too much of something in one area will create devastation, I think.
Yeah, in that one area, it would create
Yeah.
some devastation. I
Unless
don't
it's
know.
controlled, and I don't see how we can fit every single person in one area.
Yeah. Now, if we back off from this idealized one whole community for all 8 billion people and the rest of the earth being left alone, but instead looked at something intermediate in that there would be communities of several million people surrounded by enough farmland to support those people, instead of having the several million people spread out on, 150,000 small farms. This, I think, is more to the point of what the ecologists have been advocating, is that when you have 150,000 small farms, then you are creating, a lot less efficient systems in using energy and water than you would otherwise. So you have a few super farms or factories producing your food for these millions of people, and then the rest of it is wilderness.
Yeah, that could happen, but I don't. I think it's more realistic to have 120,000 smaller farms than having a bunch of super farms. Just it's always better to have small of many things. I don't know. I've always found
Okay.
than to have one of big thing, unless depending on what it is. But
Right.
but like for example, that's kind of the idea like behind drones, is instead of just having one big propeller, it has 4 small propellers, and these individual motors are able to work together and do a lot more. But obviously, if one goes out, then they're kind of useless.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of maybe a bad analogy.
No,
I-
that's a good one. It's just instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, as they used to say when I was a kid, then you've spread out your risk.
Yeah, it won't completely go out. It'll still be able to fly, just not as efficiently. But I don't know. I've always like systems become more efficient when they become smaller and you multiply them. Like for example, a motor is a V8 motor is not as efficient as 4 V4 motor, 4-cylinder motor. Like that's how kind of like the concept behind the
Right.
Tesla. It has I believe it has 4 small electric motors that work together, and it's the fastest car in the world.
I didn't know that.
The 0 to 60.
Oh, yeah, the acceleration rate would be
Acceleration.
amazing on something
Yeah.
that's well built and using an electric motor.
It
Yeah.
doesn't. Well, even not just electric motor. If once they take that concept and kind of apply it to combustion engines and smaller individual combustion engines is usually. I mean, you have more power, you have more torque in that V8, and nothing beats the sound of a supercharger in a Hemi or whatever. But some systems, in my opinion, become more efficient
Yeah.
when they become smaller and
I guess-
more of them
Yeah.
working together,
Yeah, I don't totally agree.
kind of like
but-
microchips.
Yeah, I don't totally agree with that idea, but I think there has to be a balance in there, and we can't go to one extreme or the other, or
Right,
or
that's true.
survival is not going to be assured. So let's get back to our story
just
here, because
went-
we have some beekeepers listening who have by now shut us off.
Turn to a
Yeah,
car podcast quick.
yeah, we turned into a carp. Maybe we'll do a carp podcast in the future. So granulation factors do include the type of source that the honey is coming from, how clean everything is kept so you don't have the little nuclei that's sparking the granulation crystallization, the temperature, 10 to 15 degrees Celsius or around the low 50s Fahrenheit are not ideal for keeping honey liquid, and then also moisture and sugar. So we're going to talk about those a little bit more in detail. So let me just move on a little bit here with our next subject.
Let me check my camera here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can start.
So we might have beaten floral sources to death by now, but I just want to mention it again, because the more times you hear something, tell them what they heard, tell them what they heard again, and then they'll probably remember
That's a
that
radio rule, huh?
something like that.
Rule of 3.
The rule of 3.
You got to repeat it 3 times. They'll remember it.
Canola.
Canola.
We have millions of acres of that, and that's what causes most of our granulation here. But if we talk about purity again, just keep in mind that you want to keep the dust out of your boxes. You probably, if you have an opportunity to do it, take your extracted equipment back out to the bees, but don't park it in the field next to the beehives, because you'll get robbing going. Instead, go out maybe first thing in the morning or towards evening when the bees aren't flying quite as much, so you won't have as much trouble with them jumping on the boxes. And you will put, quiet dog, you will put the boxes on the hive and put the lid back on, and then the bees will come and work those combs. And if you're really a small-time beekeeper, you might want to consider marking the hives A, B, C, D, and then each super is like A on the super, A on the second super, A on the third super, and they go back to the same A hive, and you can repeat that over and over again. Temperature, I think we covered that really well, and I just wanted to reiterate the fact that you're going to process your honey and keep it from crystallizing the best if you remove it and process it while the temperatures are warm. And Bidzina, you had some experience with cold temperature extracting.
Yeah, so I actually saw honey crystallize in real time.
That's unusual.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually sat there and watched it. Is it like watching a fractal artistry where it just...
No, sorry, I kind of phrased that the wrong way. But by the time I had, so it was, I was down to my last box, and it was nighttime now. And by the time I got to cutting the cappings off the frame and then putting it inside the extractor and then spinning, and now I'm taking it out, there was some of the cells had crystallized honey. Now that could have been from maybe another time, but some of the cells were.
I think it might be from another time. I think it might be from another time.
yeah.
However, you did point out that, I think that crystallization might have been there, and you might not have noticed it. But you did point out to me that while you were extracting and you came back to clean up a few days later, there was a layer of crystallized honey on the bottom of the extractor. So
yes, it was. Yeah, just at the... So the extractor kind of at the bottom of it is concaved, so it comes in, and the rim goes out, right? So all the honey goes to the rim, whatever's left over, and I try to get everything out, but there's always a little bit of left in the corner, and whatever that was left within 3 days had crystallized. It was at liquid at one point.
Yeah, obviously it was liquid because it came out of the combs and it drained down the sides of the extractor. Yeah. And what was the temperature like inside this building where you were gone for 3 days?
Okay, so I actually left it out. I was planning. I gave it to the bees to feed on it a little bit.
No, we don't do that.
Well,
okay.
But it was... it had rained, so I needed the extractor, so I just went and picked it up. It was actually kind of pointless to do that.
Okay.
So it was overnight. It was outside one day.
Okay.
Then I take it back home, and it's in my kitchen now. And so that was 2 days later when I checked. So it was 1 day outside and 2 days in the kitchen. And in the kitchen's like 20 degrees maybe.
And this is a kitchen that's used by more people than just you?
No, it's a commercial kitchen.
Oh, a commercial kitchen. I was picturing it being at your house and your mother looking at it, and you could, and she would be watching the honey crystallize.
Well, other people do use a commercial kitchen, but
okay,
it was a rental, 2-day rental.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not mine.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I left it outside for the bees to eat on it, and then 2 days later.
Don't do that, folks. Don't do that. Okay, go ahead.
And then I also took the boxes I took the boxes back and I left it on the side just like you said not to. And man, it was raining the next day when I went back to get my extractor.
Yeah.
Absolutely 0 bees were outside flying.
Right.
But every single box had a wasp.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen this many wasps in my life. It was like
Yeah.
a wasp hive.
Yeah.
They were eating the honey out. And I'm like, man, am I creating a wasp infestation right now? No, probably not. Am I? Or wasps are good too. I don't know why people really, they kind of get a bad rep.
They get a bad rep, especially when they sting people and when they're mistaken for honeybees and other bees, and when they when they kill beehives. But yeah, wasps do feed a lot of creatures, so a lot of birds eat wasps, and
Really?
yeah,
Okay, now I feel better.
yeah.
What are the birds eat on? The wasp larvae or just
No,
the wasps
I think they
itself?
catch them in the air.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
that is. Yep. So
That would be a way to go. If I was a wasp, get caught in the air by a bird.
I don't know if they would know what happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't live the
Okay.
day to tell the tale.
I want to talk a little bit more about the problems you could have with crystallized honey, and
Oh, okay.
it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Good boy.
He's like a pigeon.
Good
Sounds like
boy.
a pigeon.
Good boy. In case people are wondering, I am holding the dog because if he were loose, he would be up against our fence and screaming like crazy. This way I can control him a little bit. All right. So the honey will crystallize, and we were talking about temperatures to some extent. And when the family had here in Alberta, had a honey farm that produced comb honey. Ideally, the comb honey is nice, white, mild, like you eat it like candy. Children love it, and you want it to stay liquid as long as possible. But unfortunately, that's not always possible, because if you're in an area with a lot of canola,
Was that Daniel in the picture?
that was my son Daniel in the picture.
Oh.
Yeah, you met him.
I thought it
He's-
was maybe a grandson or something. Wait,
No,
that looks like
no.
Daniel.
He's a neuroscientist now in McGill.
Boy,
Yeah.
did they grow up quick. Huh?
He did,
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. So if the honey were to crystallize in the comb, it would be really hard to sell it because people don't expect that. And we did have a big problem with crystallized honey here because there's so much canola around. And what happened instead then, one of my older brothers, Don, was taking care of these bees. We had about 500 hives of bees that were producing tens of thousands of combs of honey every year. And Don built a walk-in freezer and kept the temperature at about 10 below Celsius, below freezing anyway, like 10, 15 degrees. I can't remember what his exact temperature was, but it was cold enough that the honey froze in those combs.
Wow.
And luckily we didn't have problems with condensation because it was already packed. He would try to pack the honey as quickly as possible, and then park it inside of the freezer.
Man, that's so nice.
Yeah. And then we could rush it out to the stores when they wanted to buy it, and they would get it sold within a month while it was still liquid.
Yeah, because it's kind of a seasonal product, like people aren't gonna they just comes and goes, and
Yeah.
maybe you have a repeat customer, but you never know when you're gonna sell it. And liquid honey, if you have access to it year round,
Mm-hmm.
people will buy it from you.
Right.
And
Right.
unpasteurized liquid honey, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Well, this honey was obviously unpasteurized because it was what we like to say about comb honey is that, it's just the way the bees made it. You don't even touch it with your fingers or with any machinery or any equipment. You just take it out of the colony.
So this
and
was
park
comb honey?
Yeah, this is all cases of comb honey
Whoa.
in a walk-in freezer.
Wow.
Each box would hold 18 combs. So,
Amazing.
and the combs look kind of like that, but this one is crystallized. So that was a problem. We didn't want that. And here the little chap is eating the liquid honey when it was still before it had crystallized.
Wow.
So that was the ideal. Okay. And then I think we talked a little bit about timing, but we have covered that probably in enough detail already. Timing referring to getting those boxes off the bees and processing the honey as quickly as you can. When a person has just a few hives of bees, we always encourage that they remove the honey from the hive and they extract it all in the same day if possible, because then the honey is still as warm as the hive. It won't be crystallized, and it can be processed really much more easily
Yeah.
than if you let it get cold.
No, I agree. Although, if you keep it in the boxes in your vehicle, the vehicle can get warm enough where the honey will become soft to manipulate. Well, it'll be easier to work with.
Well, that's true. That's true. On a hot, sunny day, you have a little mini greenhouse in your vehicle.
In fact, one of the boxes started melting the wax
Oh,
on top of the frames.
wow.
When I know, right?
Yeah.
And I thought I would need to use the heater of my car to heat it up, but man, you could touch the honey and it was like
Mhm.
that nice warm touch.
That will extract easily.
Yeah, it was really nice. And
Yep.
if ideally that's where you want to be, because
Yes.
then it's pretty much it's really easy at that point. You
Mhm.
could do it with a hand extractor.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even need a motorized one. But
Mhm.
as soon as it gets slightly hard and viscous, you need something powerful
That's
to
right.
get it out. Otherwise, it's not coming out. So go ahead. I was gonna say, my first year beekeeping, I helped a beekeeper, and that's what ended up happening to us. And you take out the frame, and you'd see it like, man, there's liquid honey in these cells, but they're not coming out. We were spinning the
Mhm.
extractor fast as we could, but just couldn't get it out.
Oh,
But it was liquid.
and the room temperature?
Well, it was hot, but we had waited too long a little bit. The boxes had been sitting outside
Oh, no. Yeah.
or something like that.
Right.
And we had
They
brought
chill
it.
overnight.
It
Yeah.
was and it was just brought over that
Mhm.
same day. I mean, brought in the hot room that same day. So
Right.
you'd think it would be good enough, but it still was not able to get everything out, even at the highest speed of this 4-frame motorized extractor.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a problem. So if it's at all possible, if you're just keeping a few hives of bees, even if you're in one of the mid-tier states, like not in the far south, but not in the far north like we are, but if you're in one of the mid-tier states, let's just say like in Missouri or Nevada, well, not Nevada can be very hot, but Colorado, you want to take your honey off and extract it all in the same day. So we try to, encourage people to take the honey that they can take off within a couple of hours off the bees. Maybe that's not your whole crop. You'll have to go back a second day and then spend the rest of the day extracting out that honey that you took off in those 2 hours. And then the second day, if you still have more honey, more bees to take care of, then repeat the thing. You'll be a lot further ahead than trying to get all the honey off, stacking it up, letting it chill, and then trying to extract it. It's really hard work.
Now, what did you do about filtering wise? So the honey coming out of your extractor, was
Mhm.
it filtered already?
No. Nope. I never filtered any honey when I had my commercial business.
Okay.
Never filtered it anywhere along the line.
So what did you just
Settling.
you just settled it?
Yep,
That's how
yep,
that right.
Yep.
And you'd put it in a stainless steel tank
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
heat it to a certain temperature?
Eventually I did, like towards the fall, but usually I would pull, like let's just say, for example, 200 boxes
Yeah.
and then extract that during the night or during, try to extract as quickly as possible, or sometimes I had a couple of people working in the shop, like high school kids or something,
Right.
and they would extract while I was back out in the field. But those made really long days, but that was the way to get the honey moving. And then the tank would fill up and let it set for I had 2 big tanks, each one that held about 10 drums,
Right.
so 6,000 pounds or so. And I would let the tank fill up and set for at least one full day, and then tap out the bottom, and the honey would be so clean, like all the wax and stuff floated to the top.
Would even any debris that would be in the honey?
No,
No, I'm like whatever's in the honey, it
Yeah,
floats to the top.
it would float to the top.
Everything.
Right. So if you had a broken frame or a broken mouse,
yeah.
then that would all float up to the top. And
What about like so I was
no, not mice. I'm just
one of the frames, right? You know those
Mhm.
wire that's on the
Yeah.
frames. It got loose while I was cutting. I cut
Yeah.
a little too deep
yeah.
on, and this that I don't know if I think a little bit it snapped off and it was with the comb and it just got in there and I was like I didn't get it out.
hmm
Let's say something like that, a metal piece.
I don't think that's going to float to the
That's
top very easily.
that's not gonna right. Metal does not float,
Yeah,
but it will settle all the way to the bottom
probably. Yeah.
too. So you would
Mhm.
probably see it at the end.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that in their mouth. But
They might just think it's part of the natural process of the way the bees made the honey.
oh yeah, they got some strong bees.
They did. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Those guys had strong bees.
So if you take that settling method and you apply it to a plastic food grade bucket, will it work as well? Or it should or no or
Yeah.
what at what
It
temp-
will. It will work. And what a lot of beekeepers will do, when you have a few more hives than you have right now, and you get a spot that's more or less dedicated to processing honey, you will probably want to drain your extractor into a what we call a pit. Kind of like a lower spot below the level of the extractor, and let the honey just go into that, and then put a pump at the bottom and
Okay.
pump out from the bottom. So put a pipe down into the bottom and pump the honey back up out of there.
Okay.
And that way the wax and stuff always floats to the top.
Mm.
Yeah.
And sorry, did you say the number that you would heat the settling tank at, the temperature?
Most people will go with about 120 to 140 Fahrenheit, kind of in that range.
Right, so about like 40, 50 degrees, and not just underneath pasteurization temp.
Quite a bit underneath
Quite a bit,
pasteurization
yeah.
temperature. Yeah. What I've heard other old-time beekeepers say, and this probably is a pretty good rule of thumb, is if you have a settling tank and the honey is warm inside of it, and it's made out of metal instead of plastic.
Yeah.
Maybe plastic would work the same, but plastic has some insulation material there. If you put your hand, your palm flat up against the wall on the outside, and the honey is on the inside of that tank, and if you find that you can keep your hand there without feeling like, oh man, I'm going to burn my hand. If you don't have it that hot, then it's about the right temperature. So that's what a lot of old-time beekeepers did when they heated up their honey. If it was so hot that you put your hand up against it and you go, ooh, you can't keep your hand there for more than a second, then you've got that honey way too hot. You need to turn the temperatures down because you're going to start burning the honey.
And how are you heating up these tanks?
What I did is I had a copper tube, a pipe, like, would be used for water in a water system. And I made a coil, like a spiral coil, and it went around and around. It must have been, I don't know, maybe 20 meters, like 50 or 60 feet. And on the other end of it, I had a hot water heater and a small pump, just a really small water pump.
You made this?
Yeah. So then I circulated the water around and around.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you could kind of use that for an extractor, kind of. But why would you ever want to keep your, to kind of keep your extractor heated?
No, that's a good thought, but obviously you've already answered the reason you wouldn't, because the honey's not going to be in that extractor for very long.
Yeah, it should be liquid.
It's just afterwards.
Yeah.
Afterwards, when it gets churned in with a little bit of specks of wax and crystallization is a lot more likely, then you're going to have some problems.
And sorry, this is kind of a last question. We can move on.
Okay.
Sorry. Is there a certain number that you were going for? Like, let's say you're like, okay, I have whatever, like 200 boxes to extract, and it's about 4,000 pounds of honey or whatever it is, right? I want if I extract 3,000 out of the 4, I'm happy. Or no, you're wanting to extract every pound.
Right.
Is that what was that your
Right.
goal?
Yeah. To the point where if I looked down inside the extractor
Yeah.
and it was spinning at the fastest speed that you could put it at, and all these combs were going around and around and around and around, then if you're looking straight down into the extractor, if you have one of those vertical axis ones, you're looking straight down, you don't see any specks of honey falling out, then you're done.
Right. And you were going that for every single frame. That's what you would like.
Yeah.
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 And you went the extra mile for that to happen, or sometimes you're like, screw it, I only want to get 90% of what I harvest.
No, there might be some merit to that, but I think, if you leave that honey in there, it's going to start crystallizing.
It's going to cause issues later on.
Yeah.
Right, it does, because then I thought, I came across that where I had boxes from the previous year that now I wanted to use. There was crystallized honey in it, and I thought the bees would just clean it out, and they don't.
No, not after that much time. And
Yeah.
if you put them on when there was a bit of a honey flow going,
Yeah.
then they'll pretty much leave it there and just put honey on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you put it out now, at this time of the year here in Alberta, and our honey season is over, and we still have some mildish weather, then you could put them out, and there's not much honey coming in. The bees will clean it up.
Right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you wait,
Mm-hmm.
they're not.
It'll just take a couple days too. So you just drop by with the boxes, come back a few days later, and they're really dry then. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. That's interesting to know. See, it's all these things that you would never think. Like, if you were to do as a hobby beekeeper, all these things don't really matter. But if you wanted to, like, it's really, if you wanted to have a business or somewhat profitable little side business, it's so much knowledge that,
Yeah.
and that's probably why.
Yeah, you can always
tweak.
tweak things, and depends a lot on a person's personality and what they feel comfortable getting away with.
Yeah.
But I think in any situation, what should be the number one thought on a person's mind is the cleanliness of the whole outfit. So whether you're running a few hives and you leave some honey behind in the combs, that's okay. If that's the way you want to do it, it's okay. But you just want to keep things as clean and tidy as you can. That, I think, is something you can't really reverse. So that's about the only thing, regardless of the size of an operation. You just want it to be neat, to not let anything get into it.
It can get out of hand.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
can. I've seen it happen for a lot of people.
My-
And yeah.
My
Mhm.
mom. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, my mom has a saying where she said, one person can make a room dirty, and you would need 10 to clean after them, and you would still not be able to keep up with that one.
How many times did she have to tell you that?
Yeah,
Oh.
that it's stuck in my head now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what but it's true though. You go in and you can really destroy stuff. It's easy to destroy something because there's so many ways to do it. I can slam this, smush this, hit it with a microphone, blah blah. But there's only so many ways. There's only few ways to make it, and it's kind of there's only so ways you can clean it, but you can make a mess. And then once it gets out of hand for beekeeping, man.
Yeah.
It gets out of hand.
It gets out of hand.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Because there's just boxes on
Yeah.
boxes more than your house.
Oh.
Bigger than the whatever
Well,
the word is, carbon
This is
footprint
really
of your house.
this is really good to talk about, because I'm sure there are some people who will be listening to this who haven't yet started in bees, and they're thinking, it's a nice, clean, easygoing kind of
No.
thing. No. It's a lot of hard work, and honey is sticky. It attracts dust
Yeah.
and dirt, and it's
And
easy.
hair.
And hair, yeah. That's why we have a dog here that its hair doesn't fall out.
Did you know Dollarama doesn't sell the beard masks for the hair?
No, I didn't know that.
And then Walmart.
But why would I be looking for that anyway? Like, why would I know that? That's one of those things that I just wouldn't want, and I wouldn't need to know.
Well, I recently found this out, and then
Mhm.
Walmart lists it on their website, but then you go in store and you have to order it online. They're doing this weird phenomenon. Well, it's not a phenomenon, but have you noticed this? Where they list stuff on their website, and then you
No.
go into the store, and it's, oh, you could only get that online.
Oh, that's
Why do you
pretty
guys have
rude.
a physical store?
Yeah. Yeah, that's not very kind.
I don't know. That kind of a little
That's that's
that
frustrating.
grinds my gears a
No,
little bit.
yeah, let's move on then so you're not ground right out. I just had a couple of quick charts I wanted to talk about that I'm showing right now. So if you're watching this, you're going to see a graph, and the graph's title is Risk of Granulation for Liquid Honey Stored for 6 Months. So this came from some research that was conducted by the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, by a scientist named Jonathan White. And what he did is he solicited honey samples from 300 beekeepers around the United States. And they came from virtually every state. I think he had something from every state and a wide variety of different locations. And he identified the honey by the address and the county of each producer. So people, beekeepers, sent him honey, and the honey was analyzed for the amount of glucose, fructose, sucrose, the amount of ash content, the amount of proteins, amino acids, which were from pollen content. They were analyzed for the water content. He looked at the color of the honey, and he set the honey aside for 6 months, and every month he looked at the honey and counted or measured and quantified the, well, more like qualified, but he checked on the amount of granulation or crystallization in the honey samples. And that way he found a relationship between the amount of glucose in the honey and how quickly the honey was crystallizing.
Huh. So, yeah, Ron has a list of different honeys here. So, what is that first one? Manzanita?
Yeah, manzanita is a bush that grows in the mountains in California.
Okay.
And according to the samples that were received by the USDA years ago for this experimental work, this statistical quantification, the average of the manzanita honey that came into their offices averaged 37% glucose. That is a lot. That's almost pushing 40% glucose. Right. So that's really quite high. And the lowest one on this list was from sourwood, also a mountainous type of honey produced more along the East Coast in Tennessee, Kentucky, in the Appalachian Mountains from a tree.
Now, I've never...
And it only had about 24% glucose.
Now, I've never worked with manzanita or...
mesquite.
Have you worked with these?
No, I've tasted it.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
Mesquite honey is more of a desert type of a plant and honey. Also very high in glucose, and so is cotton and canola.
Right.
Those are very high in glucose.
Yeah.
And the higher in glucose, the more readily it's going to crystallize.
And yeah, so we've never worked with manzanita. So manzanita is at 37.1% glucose, but we have worked with canola, which is at 36.4%. It's fairly similar.
Yes.
And then if you go down the list here, you got fireweed and sweet clover at 32.5% and fireweed at 30.7%. And so you mentioned sweet clover doesn't crystallize fast as canola.
Right.
So that 4% difference in glucose is...
It's quite a big difference,
Wow,
actually.
it's quite a big difference.
Yeah.
And fireweed is a honey that's known to stay liquid for quite some time. Am I... or right? Or is fireweed honey?
Yeah, it will stay liquid for a longer period of time because it's way down to around 30% glucose.
Right, and that's only a 6% difference from canola, which canola is one of the
quicker
ones. That's incredible. That's a 6% That's
Yes.
what's all the other factors as well, probably.
Right. The canola
Right.
being produced in an area that's typically cool,
Yeah.
and that contributes to crystallization, at least inside of the comb. Once the canola is harvested and processed, it will last quite a long time on the store shelf, because if they pasteurize it, they remove all the little particles. And if the moisture level, this is really something key to remember, is that if moisture is high in your honey, then you don't have your sugars as concentrated. They're diluted a little bit more, and it won't crystallize as quickly. So the drier the honey is, the faster it will crystallize. And that's what the table or the chart is trying to indicate here, is that actually I have another chart. I'm just going to move ahead here. And this lists the location of different honeys and shows a little bit more about the range of moisture, and also the what should I say here? Okay, if we look at really low moisture honey, then it will crystallize really quickly, even if the glucose is quite low. If the glucose is pretty high in the honey, but the moisture is also high, your crystallization problem isn't going to be nearly as bad. So something like buckwheat honey, which averages about 29.5% glucose, it will stay liquid quite a bit longer than other types of honey, all the way up to, well, if the moisture level is above 18%, buckwheat will probably stay liquid for most of the time. So that's kind of the relationship. The thing to really take away from this, and we're kind of moving into our final summary here.
Is manzanita honey and mesquite, do they also crystallize fast?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a correlation there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah,
Yeah, because of the higher glucose.
Right.
The real
Salt.
relationship between moisture and glucose is that if the honey has 1.5 times as much percentage-wise glucose as it has water, it will not crystallize. So if your honey is, say, 18% moisture, then 1.5 times 18% is 27. So if the glucose is more than 27% glucose, the honey will crystallize. But if it's lower than 27%, as we saw with Tupelo, for example, being around 24%, then it's not going to crystallize, even at 18% moisture. That's the relationship.
Interesting.
I think the real take-home here is for people to remember that the honey is dependent upon how much moisture is in it. So if you are producing a really low moisture honey, as we often do in southern Alberta, then we are at risk of having the honey crystallize even more quickly. So I think another episode we'll talk about what happens afterwards with honey. So if the honey is crystallized in a jar and has little crystals forming, what are you going to do? Like, what's the proper way of heating it up and making it liquid again? But we're running out of time here today with this episode.
We got about 7 more minutes.
7 more minutes, and then what happens?
Well, we'll hit 1:30.
Oh, an hour and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an awful long
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
It is.
Yep. So, do you want to do a summary of what we kind of went through?
Well, I've done this one crazy method. I don't know if anybody's ever tried, but my honey crystallized in the jars, and I wanted to make it liquid again. So I decided to use the sous vide method.
Sovita.
You can't hear.
I heard me. I said Sovita.
Yeah, sous vide. You know about that one?
No.
It's the slow cooking of meat in water.
Oh, okay. No,
You know,
I don't know much about that. But
so you take a tub, you put this thing inside of it where it heats the water consistently to 120 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, you can go higher than that, but it's like a very low temperature cooking. Vacuum seal the meat, put it in the water. It cooks the meat thoroughly, keeping all the juices, and then you cut it out and sear it afterwards. Apparently, it's the rich way of eating steak,
Wow.
sous vide. But you can get them for pretty cheap on Amazon. They're about $100. These things that heat up the water.
Okay.
So I bought it off Amazon. Then I got a tub, a food grade tub. I filled it up with water, put all my put my jars of honey in it, and left it overnight. And about just under 55 degrees or 60 degrees Celsius.
Right. Yeah.
And just left it. And they did turn liquid in about 2 days.
Uh-huh.
It was a complete solid jar of honey. But that it was kind of a very inefficient method, I think. Right?
Well, you're doing a small amount, aren't you?
You could, in theory, heat up a pool table size water with this thing, like a tub.
Yeah.
Like a big tub. If you, let's say you preheat it, wait 2 hours, within 2 hours it will get to your temperature.
Okay.
And you leave it.
So you filled it up with hot water to begin with.
You don't even necessarily have to fill it with hot water. Within 2 hours, it circulates the water, and it gets it to that temperature within certain time.
Why don't we explore that more next time? Not next episode. We're making right at this point. We're making season 2, episode 2. So that's where we are right now, and we will have. Well, we've got a lot of things planned for this season. I've got quite a few people who are interested in chatting with us. So we've got somebody who's a specialist in bumblebees, which I'm really looking forward to talking to. Have a gentleman who operates a huge queen breeding farm in the southern United States. He will be a guest in the near future, and other folks too. So that's all coming up. And we will do an episode on handling honey that's already been crystallized. That I think will be worth talking about at some point.
Okay, if we will talk about it again, then I won't. I thought this would be the only.
No. We're going to come back to it.
Okay.
Yeah, we come back to everything eventually, don't we? But that will be a whole episode. And what do you do with your honey once it's crystallized? That's a good question. Well, this has been great. We're really dragging right towards the very end of the time we wanted to put in. I would look forward to, we would look forward to any questions that people may want to submit. We can do an email read and try to answer your questions and give you more advice or ideas or commentary or suggestions or inaccurate ideas that you could pursue.
That's a great idea. I will leave the email in the description, but for the audio listeners, it's if you email us at podcastabcc@gmail.com, podcastabcc@gmail.com, and we will be able to respond to you directly from there.
Okay, well, we won't respond to you necessarily directly from there, but what we will do is bring the questions in so everybody can hear the answer. If your question is good enough, and if it's really, really good, we'll even send you a prize.
Please don't put us in some spam.
Yeah, we want to avoid that. Folks, it's been really great. Really appreciate the audience. Make sure that you like, love, follow. Pay attention to us next time again. We'll see you in next week again. Okay, for episode 3 in season 2. Yeah, take it home.
Oh, wait, you're talking to me?
Yeah, I was saying take it home.
Okay. Well, see you guys next week. Don't forget to turn on your notification bells and come back 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, every Monday, every day.